Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never imagined that my life would spiral into such chaos, with my own mother-in-law at the center of it all. This is the story of how my mother-in-law orchestrated a diabolical plan, leading to my arrest and nearly destroying my life. Buckle up because this roller coaster ride isn't for the faint of heart. It all began with the passing of my beloved uncle, who bequeathed his house to me. At the time, little did I know that my conniving mother-in-law was scheming behind my back, forging documents to claim ownership of the property. Unbeknownst to me, she harbored a deep resentment towards me even before I married her daughter. She had hoped for my wife to marry a wealthy suitor, not a man like me. In a cruel twist of fate, my wife had been involved in a severe car accident and slipped into a coma due to brain trauma. As a result, my mother-in-law and I were forced to spend considerable time together, as we both cared for my wife during her incapacitated state. Our strained relationship grew even more toxic, but I tried my best to endure it for my wife's sake. Little did I know that my life was about to unravel in the most unimaginable way. One fateful day, my world came crashing down when the police stormed into my house, brandishing guns and accusing me of possessing an illegal firearm. I was dumbfounded. I had never owned a gun in my life. Despite my protests, they ignored my words and charged me with possession of an illegal firearm, trespassing, and theft of the house. In the eyes of the law, I was nothing more than a criminal, as my mother-in-law had cunningly manipulated the situation to her advantage. With my wife still in a coma, I had no one to advocate for me. Fear gripped me as I contemplated the prospect of spending years in prison for crimes I hadn't committed. Fortunately, the authorities decided not to detain me pending the resolution of the case. They released me, allowing me to seek legal representation and prepare for the impending court battle. However, I couldn't return to my home, which my mother-in-law had shamelessly occupied, tossing my belongings out like discarded rubbish. The rage and despair within me surged, but I was determined to prove my innocence and expose my mother-in-law's treachery. Although I was not a wealthy or highly educated man, I possessed a sharp mind. I knew I had to find evidence to support my claims and clear my name. I focused on two crucial aspects: disproving my mother-in-law's alleged travel to a neighboring country and obtaining fingerprints from the weapon she had planted. These pieces of evidence would be pivotal in unmasking her deceit. Fate smiled upon me when a benevolent favor from one of my uncle's friends, a lawyer, offered his expertise pro bono. Together, we launched a full investigation, scrutinizing my mother-in-law's travel history and collecting fingerprint samples from the weapon. It was a race against time to unearth the truth and secure my freedom before it was too late. Eventually, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The police discovered that my mother-in-law had indeed recently traveled to the neighboring country where firearms were readily available. Furthermore, the fingerprints retrieved from the gun conclusively implicated her, not me. The tide had turned, and the authorities finally started to believe my side of the story. Unable to provide legitimate documentation to prove her ownership, my mother-in-law's web of deceit unraveled further. They delved into the history of the house's previous owner, my uncle, finding no connection whatsoever to my mother-in-law. It became abundantly clear that she had fabricated everything to steal my inheritance and frame me for her crimes. The tables had turned on my wicked mother-in-law. The police dropped all charges against me and redirected their focus onto her. In addition to the illegal possession of a firearm, she faced severe consequences for forging official documents, an offense that carried a significant jail sentence. Finally, justice would be served. I filed a lawsuit against my mother-in-law to reclaim the lost possessions and bring her to financial accountability. Unable to afford a competent lawyer, she stood defenseless in court, with her actions haunting her as she faced the consequences of her malicious intent. It was a bittersweet victory knowing that justice was served, but the damage had already been done. After months of tumult and instability, I could finally return to my rightful home. The feeling of relief washed over me as I stepped through the door, knowing that I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine. However, the scars left by this harrowing experience would forever remain. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This happened around 20 years ago. Our family owned 2 apartment buildings, each with 3 units. We lived in 2 of them and rented out the other 4. There were nothing but these 3 flats lining both sides of the road for about a mile. Not all of them had parking. On the side streets, there were houses and very little street parking. We had more land than most of these units because it was also our home, so we had parking for around 16 cars. Everything was fine for literally decades. Then cars started appearing in our parking lot that were not from our tenants. One day I blocked one in. When I went outside, I saw that this a-hole had driven through our bushes and across the yard to get out. I called the cops, but there was nothing they could do. So I called a tow company and had them put up signs. We would have to call them to have a car towed. The signs seemed to work. No more random cars. Until New Year's Eve one year. I arrived home, and every space was filled. There were even cars on the street, blocking in the other cars. I was beyond pissed. I called the tow company, but they couldn't do anything for a few hours because they were so busy. We're in the Chicago suburbs, and it's below zero out. I had an idea. I dug out the lawn sprinklers and hoses. I ran one hose inside to the laundry room faucet and turned on the hot water. This way the hose and sprinklers wouldn't ice up. But the cars and the ground sure did. I used 3 sprinklers, moving them every half hour or so for almost 5 hours. Every car and every square inch of the parking lot, as well as the street by the cars, was encased in ice. I made it a point to spray ice into the locks, between the window seals and glass, and in the grills. Then I put away the sprinklers and hoses and went to bed. At 4 a.m. there was furious pounding on the doors and nonstop ringing of doorbells. We just smiled and called the cops. We waited until they arrived and went outside. The cops were holding back laughter. These people were told to park here by their friend who owned an apartment several buildings away. It was the same idiot who drove over our bushes. I pointed to the tow sign and told the people to move their cars or get towed. In our town, cops can ticket on private property with the owner's permission, so all the cars were ticketed. They were also towed since nobody could get into their vehicles. I wish we had it on video. The next one is a petty revenge story. I have dwarfism, and this often leads to weird interactions in public, especially with kids. Sometimes a kid comes up to me to ask why I'm so short, and I have a pre-prepared response for that, but most of the time they just loudly ask their parents why I'm so short. Usually the parents will awkwardly drag their kids away, telling them not to comment on people in public, which is sad but understandable. I like the parents who just say something about how some people are born like this, and even though we look a bit different, we're still regular people just like everyone else. Sometimes I hear a gem like, "I bet he shrank in the wash." What I can't stand is when people try to use me to parent their kids. I'm sure you can think of ways to convince your kids to finish their plate at dinner that don't involve pointing at a dwarf in public and saying that's what happens when you leave food on your plate, or he didn't listen to his mommy when she told him to eat all his vegetables. It's rude, it's humiliating, and it teaches your kid that differences are a bad thing and that people are at fault for their differences or disabilities. It just pisses me off. A few days ago, I was in public, and a kid who was maybe 4 or 5 years old was acting out, and his mom was clearly struggling to keep him under control. So she pointed to me and told her son that I was one of Santa's elves, and I was watching him and would tell Santa about his behavior. The kid's name was on a keyring on his backpack, so I just said, "It's okay, Hunter, you're already on the nice list, and Santa told me you're getting an iPad this Christmas." Hunter was excited. His mom was not. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So this happened a couple of years ago when I was 19 or 20, somewhere around then. As a wee lad, I got a job working at a local superstore while attending college. I was a cashier. It sucked. But honestly, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. My immediate manager helped protect the cashiers from the higher-ups. But those are war stories for another day. As time went on, as it does, eventually the dreaded holiday season came around. Thanksgiving week to be exact. I got the week off of school due to the holidays and was scheduled to work a juicy 40 hours that week. But unfortunately, I was scheduled to work on Thanksgiving and Black Friday. My schedule had Thursdays off, but Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday, and I was being forced to work. The good news is, at least they fed us a ton of food in the break room. That was honestly nice. But I was bummed that I had to miss the holiday with family since I had prepared to have the day off as I thought I would. Now, before we get into the main story, a quick note. The store did not allow overtime, OT. You were given extra lunches, sent home early, whatever they had to do to avoid paying out. If you got OT, You were either lucky or you had a major problem you were being made to handle. Management was salaried, and the enlisted workers were lucky to get 38 plus hours. No extra money for the folks in the trenches. As we are a major store that caters to everything from groceries to electronics, we prepared for a very long week that tends to mark the hustle and bustle of the holiday season as a whole. The energy is pretty low as we all really dread this time of year, and I am extra nervous. This is my first retail job on the front lines during the holidays, and I heard all the horror stories about what is coming. The store manager, SM, gathers up a lot of the workers for a quick announcement that Monday. He tells us that essentially we are really behind and have a ton of work to do, and this is going to be a rough and wild week. So he is authorizing any and all OT across all departments from today until Sunday. He told the managers and department heads that if an employee wanted to work, let them work. We need the coverage. Later on, we would discover what he meant was letting us come in on our days off to work an extra shift or two, tacking on a nice 8 hours to our paychecks. Whoops. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them work. And oh boy, oh lord, oh gosh, oh golly gee whiz, did we want to work? Let me tell you, we went crazy. I pulled 6 doubles that week. Someone parked their RV in the parking lot and worked what had to most likely be forbidden due to labor laws. People were working maximum hours. One day I worked so long our manager gave me 3 lunch breaks. Dozens of people jumped at this opportunity. The next day I came in and saw the overnight guys still puttering around. We milked that week for every hour, every cent of possible overtime. I don't recall all the numbers and such directly, but I think I went from a 72-hour paycheck to one that had about 118, and around 42 was OT, which was 1.5x paid. It's been a few years, but those numbers feel right. Also, if you work on Thanksgiving, you are given a single-use 25% off coupon to use in the store on one big order. Since I use my overtime on stuff to buy in the store, it felt like I earned an extra 25% on top of that. Management let it happen. No one said anything to the SM that week, and he sat in his office. It was 2 days after that week that some corporate suits showed up and gave him a verbal beating when they realized he blatantly authorized that. I think early on he realized his mistake, but the die was cast, and truth be told, we did need to get the work done. All that OT and we barely were ready for the open door on Black Friday. He was mad, shouted at a couple of managers after he got yelled at asking why they let us work so much, but they just shrugged. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them. It was immediately dropped, and it was clear it would never be allowed again, and policy would remain as it was. I bought a TV, a month or more of groceries, Christmas gifts for everyone, a new car battery, 2 new tires, and some random things here and there for myself. It was worth it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The next one is an entitled people story. Having a family that knows about your Reddit account has its disadvantages. Yesterday, my sister called me after I got off work to ask if comments were still coming in. She said she couldn't bear the negativity of looking at them herself because the comments were all so hurtful towards her, so I was brutally honest. At least 10 comments are still coming in daily, and most of them more or less say the same things about her. She started crying and demanded I delete my Reddit posts, but I refused and told her she can cry to anyone she wants. But the posts stay up because they are my assurance that she won't try to treat me like crap anymore. After all, she literally felt like my life should revolve around hers, didn't pay me the babysitting money she was supposed to, pocketed it for herself, and forced me to be the constant babysitter on last year's family vacation, so I had pretty much no fun the entire time. Is it really any wonder people have so much hate for her when she treated me like that? Then when I mentioned the posts have already spread to other websites because I was asked a couple of times to let an article be made about my situation, and there are some videos that were read as well. My sister shrieked hearing that and hung up. My parents then called me begging me to take the posts down. I've refused and stated that I only did this because they didn't stick up for me. This would have never happened if they'd told my sister to treat me like an equal and not a servant. I'm not her butler, babysitter, or handyman. I'm her freaking brother and a grown-ass man. Wouldn't they be tired of this crap in my shoes too? They agreed, but still begged me to take the post down. I refused and said that I'll keep making more if they don't start sticking up for me more when my sister comes crying to them. Let her clean up her own messes, because all the enabling of her led to this. I didn't father those kids. I've got a life of my own, a career I'm still new to, and hopefully soon enough a girlfriend, as there's someone I want to ask out. I'm moving my life forward, and I won't be held back. They can either step out of my way or keep trying to enable my sister. But I assured them that the latter would end badly for them. The only way this posting on Reddit will stop is if the drama stops. I've kept things anonymous, and I have a right to vent my very valid frustrations. Well, that left my mother crying. My father just went silent, and I said tears don't move me. They know what it'll take to end this, and that's to stop enabling my sister. Well, my sister called me again to yell at me that our parents have told her they aren't dealing with this anymore and to figure it out herself. Oh, and they told her to be nicer to me too. I just pictured her eye twitching as she internally screamed after hearing that. Be nice to my kid, brother. What is this? Do I look it up on Google? Yeah, I was that sarcastic to her, but it left her crying too when I hung up. My brother-in-law called me later to get my side of the story. He was mad I'm still posting and made his wife cry, but I explained everything to him and he said he'd have another talk with my sister. I'm hoping this drama finally ends here. But the family vacation is still on for late June. I've already booked my room and put in for a day off work so we can all leave on a Friday. My room is also not near the ones my parents, sister, brother-in-law, and nephews will be using. In fact, it's not even on the same floor. And when we go to the coast, when it's not a family activity, I'm going to go where I want and do what I want. And you can bet I'm going to tour those art galleries, pig out on local food, and just enjoy being carefree for a change. The next one is an entitled parents story. A little context. I work at a water park roughly 30 minutes away from my house, and I got my job from being friends with the director and having another friend in the business, but don't think for a second that I don't work. I'm the second hardest working person there, and I've received the Employee of the Month twice in the single year I've worked there, so I knew people there and people liked me. I don't particularly like kids, but I can handle them well enough. The water park also has two sections, the kids' side and the adults' side. This story takes place on the kids' side of the park. All of my fellow employees hate working on the play structure. It has a slide and kids are annoying, so I decided to take it for the day, take one for the team, you know. So I was up in the play structure and my job was to send kids down the slide when it was safe for them to go. This little girl comes up to the top and wants to go down. I wait a second until I see the other kids start to get out, then turn to tell the girl she can go, but she's already halfway down the slide. She nearly hits the kid because he was slow to get out. She comes back up and I kneel down and say, "Hey, that was dangerous. You could have hit that kid and both gotten hurt. Please wait for me to tell you when it's safe to go down the slide." She nodded and actually followed my instructions. But this is when she broke the rules again. At the entrance to the play structure, there's a sign that gives the rules. Wait for the worker to let you go down before going down the slide, and you aren't allowed to go face first. She decided to ignore Rule 2 and went down face first. She came back up again, so I knelt down again and said, "Hey, you can't go down head first. You could hurt yourself." She nodded and then went down head first again, anyway. The play structure works on a 3-strike system, so as that was her third time breaking the rules, I had to kick her off the slide. So when she came back up and started to walk towards the slide, I stepped in her way and said, "I'm sorry, you broke the rules 3 times, so you can't go down anymore." She yelled at me and tried to push her way past, but I'm bigger and stronger than her, so she couldn't get through and went back down the stairs in a huff. A solid 10 minutes passed, then she comes back up holding her mother's hand. Her mom says, relatively calmly at first, "My daughter told me you told her she couldn't go down the slide anymore. Is that true?" I said, "That is correct, ma'am." She asked me why, so I explained that if a person breaks the rules 3 times, they can't go down the slide. She gets closer to me and says, "Okay, I understand that, but she's 4 years old." I respond with, "Ma'am, it doesn't matter how old she is. She still broke the rules 3 times, so she can't go down the slide anymore today." She gets even closer and says, "Okay, but she's 4. I respond with, "I understand, but the rules apply to big kids the same as they do for the small kids, so she can't go down anymore today." Now, I'm 19, close to 20, relatively tall, not super muscular, white, and gay. A lot of people tend to notice that last one since I don't try to hide it. You can usually tell based on my mannerisms and the way I talk. Another thing I deal with, severe anger issues. And based on trauma from my childhood, people being in close proximity to my face makes me incredibly uncomfortable. This lady was maybe an inch away from my face when she started yelling at me and calling me a fucking FG. I was so close to losing my cool, I could actually feel my face turning beet red. My hands were balled into fists, and my jaw was incredibly tense. A bit more about me. I might look like a scrawny white kid, but when I get angry, I look like a demon, not my words. I wasn't even doing anything, and I was terrifying her daughter. In an attempt to keep my cool and to get this wail out of my face, I said, "Ma'am, please don't call me slurs. It's uncalled for and rude. I'm only doing my job." To my surprise, she actually got out of my face, scoffed, and said, "Let's go find someone in charge." Apparently, she had a day pass because I saw her later that evening talking to my manager. She looked over and saw me cleaning, and I just heard, "That's him!" My manager, Herm, who hates me by the way, comes over to me and asks me if I assaulted this woman's daughter. I, of course, said I didn't. But because he's a rampant asshole, he went to look at the cameras anyway. He saw that I was right in what I did and that I did everything according to procedure. We then went over to talk to the lady. She said, "Well, is he in trouble or not?" Herm looks at her and says, "He never did anything wrong, and he never assaulted your daughter." Then he gets this strange look and asks for her day pass. At first, she refuses to give it to him, then relents and gives Herm her pass. Turns out she wasn't even supposed to be there. Her pass had expired the day before, but she just didn't leave the hotel. So I had the privilege of escorting her to her room, waiting outside while they packed, and then escorting them out of the building. She was cussing me out the whole way out of the park, in front of her 4-year-old daughter, no less. Mom of the year, everyone. As we got out to her car, right as she got in, I said, "Thanks for coming to Name of the Park. Feel free to never come again," with the biggest grin on my face because that was my first Karen. At least it ended well. When I got inside, my manager told me I handled the situation very well, and I had a pretty uneventful end of the night. So please remember not to be rude to the workers because we're often right. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.